Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of my legislation, the Stop Chinese Fentanyl Act, that is currently before the House. The fentanyl crisis is one that is affecting families and communities across the United States. As of 2021, 70,601 Americans died as a result of synthetic opioid overdoses. As of 2020, 82.3% of all opioid-involved overdoses were the result of synthetic opioids. And last year, almost 70% of all drug overdose deaths were caused by fentanyl. Over 100,000 Americans' lives destroyed because of this. And this has certainly impacted my home state, the Commonwealth of Kentucky. A recent drug overdose report from the Kentucky Office of Drug Control Policy reported that there was a 14.5% increase in overdose deaths in my home state. And according to cases autopsied by the Kentucky Office of the State Medical Examiner and toxicology reports submitted by Kentucky coroners, the rise in the death toll was driven largely by an increased use of fentanyl, accounting for approximately 70% of all overdose deaths in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Unfortunately, this scourge has spread with the help of our greatest strategic threat, the People's Republic of China and the Chinese Communist Party. We know that China has historically been and remains the primary source of fentanyl in global circulation. Since the Trump administration tightened controls on the shipment of fentanyl into the United States, the CCP has adjusted their practices and begun producing precursor chemicals and outsourcing final production to cartel laboratories in Mexico to then exploit our porous southern border and poison the American people. In 2020, U.S. Customs and Border Protection seized 4.8 thousand pounds of fentanyl, or enough to kill over 1 billion people. Just a tiny little bit of this very deadly synthetic opioid is enough to kill. This figure more than tripled in just 2 years to 14.7 thousand pounds in 2022. And in the first 2 months of 2023, Customs and Border Protection seized 12.5 thousand pounds. And much of this is originating from China, exploiting the cartels and exploiting our open southern border. We must attack the production of fentanyl at its source by targeting the source of the precursors in China. My legislation places sanctions on Chinese producers of synthetic opioids and opioid precursors and holds senior government and Chinese political officials accountable for the spread of illicit fentanyl. Specifically, it amends the Fentanyl Sanctions Act to expand the definition of a foreign opioid trafficker to include any Chinese entity that produces, manufactures, distributes, sells, finances, or transports synthetic opioids or active pharmaceutical ingredients or chemicals used to produce synthetic opioids, and fails to take credible steps to detect or prevent opioid trafficking, including know your customer procedures or cooperation with U.S. counter-narcotics efforts. The expanded definition also includes any senior officials of the PRC government or other Chinese political official that has significant regulatory or law enforcement responsibilities and fails to take credible steps to combat foreign opioid traffickers. Their culpability, the culpability of the Chinese Communist Party in this epidemic in our country, does not end when their precursor products land in Mexico or illegally cross our southern border. We must look at every step of fentanyl's deadly supply chain. This bipartisan legislation passed the House Foreign Affairs Committee by voice vote earlier this year and is a needed step to control this deadly drug. I urge support for this bill and reserve the balance of my time.